Happy Wednesday, everyone. I hope you all are doing great. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, Policies for Inclusive Entrepreneurship 101. We're going to give people about 30 seconds to join, and then we'll kick things off. But again, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so the time is now 3:01 here on the East Coast. Thank you again for joining us for Policies for Inclusive Entrepreneurship 101. My name is Olivia Harp, and I am here to get you settled on the platform before we kick off today's content. So just a few housekeeping tips to keep in mind. This webinar is being recorded and will be mailed out to you all within a week from today. You will also receive the slide deck, so you can keep all of that information to save as you're going back to your work post webinar. You're all muted to ensure sound quality, but please use that questions box on the GoToWebinar control panel. We are going to get into a really great Q&A session towards the end of this webinar, but we also want you to use that throughout the webinar to submit any questions that come to mind, any comments or stories that you would like to share. And if you are experiencing any technical issues, please email us at gotomeeting@prosperitynow.org. So we want you to get the most out of today's call. So please join from a cozy space, grab a coffee. I know it's that midday crash time, so grab a coffee or a snack. Anything that you need to get comfortable. Again, engage us in the questions and comments box as you listen along and reflect on ways to apply everything that you learned today to your everyday work. So without further ado, I'm going to pass things over to Mirto Karaflos. She is the policy manager here at Prosperity Now.
Thanks, Olivia, and hi, everyone. Welcome again to the webinar. Like Olivia mentioned, my name is Mirto. I'm the policy manager here, and I work on small business issues at the federal level. And on the next slide, just a little bit about Prosperity Now. Our mission is to ensure everyone in our country has a clear path to financial stability, wealth, and prosperity. And yeah, so today's agenda. So I will start us off with some framing, share some data points around entrepreneurship and the disparities that entrepreneurs of color experience compared to their white counterparts. And then we'll move on to a panel discussion with our speakers today. We'll have some Q&A with from you, the audience, and then we will close out. And on the next slide, so yeah, we have a great lineup of speakers today. We have Clorinda Landeros, the Director of Public Policy at NowCab. We have Grant Twyman, the Managing Partner at Next Consulting Firm, and Tasha Brown, the Midwest Director at Small Business Majority. And I'll ask them when we get to the panel discussion to introduce themselves a bit more, talk about their work. But for now, just wanted to start us off by talking a little bit about this report. Inclusive entrepreneurship is key to unlocking equal opportunity. So Prosperity Now published this back in February in collaboration with the Progressive Policy Institute. And yeah, this report takes a look at inclusive entrepreneurship. When we say that, we mean that every individual has an equitable opportunity to launch and grow a business, no matter their demographic characteristics, race or ethnicity. And in particular, for this report, we focused on entrepreneurs of color, Black and Latina specifically. So on the next slide, We're going to look at the importance of entrepreneurship. So if we could just switch to the next slide, please. Let me just keep going. So it can be a way to build wealth and a way for individuals to pass wealth down to their future generations across family. And it's an important part of the economy. So small businesses account for 99% of American employers, and they employ almost half of the US workforce, 47%. And they're credited for 2/3 of new jobs created from 1995 to 2021. And on the next slide, the COVID pandemic's effects. Sorry, I'm not sure if the slides are moving here, but so we saw during the pandemic that the small businesses were hit particularly hard, but I think we're one slide before that. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. So yeah, small businesses were all hit hard during the pandemic, but we saw that businesses owned by people of color, they were more likely to experience those ill effects. So they were more likely to experience closures at the beginning of the pandemic. And they also experienced greater reductions to earnings. So as we see in this graph, in 2020, Black business owners had an 11% reduction in earnings, and 7% for Latina business owners, compared to just 2% for white business owners. And also government programs like the Paycheck Protection Program, which was meant to help businesses cover payroll and other expenses during early in the pandemic, was also inequitable. So even though businesses of color had the greatest need, they were less likely to receive those funds early in the pandemic. And on the next slide, so even though the pandemic so it served to highlight some of the existing disparities that entrepreneurs of color have had to face for a long time. So just to go over a few of those, Black and Latina individuals, they own fewer businesses relative to their share of the population compared to white individuals. And they're also more likely to be sole proprietors, so they don't have employees. So as we can see in this graph here, even though white individuals make up about 3/4 of the US population, they own 83.5% of employer businesses, but Black individuals own just over 2%, Latina individuals own about 6% of those employer businesses. And this can be a problem because in general, sole proprietors tend to have lower revenues than businesses with employees. And this also represents a missed opportunity for communities of color, because firms owned by people of color are more likely to hire workers of color. So on the next slide, we'll see that a lot of these disparities are due to structural barriers that entrepreneurs of color have long faced. A large barrier is a limited access to capital, and this includes several factors. They tend to have lower levels of personal and family savings, which are often used to start up a business. They have fewer banking relationships, which can be a key factor in securing those loans from financial institutions. And they also tend to face lending discrimination. So as an example, the 2022 Small Business Credit Survey found that white-owned firms were twice as likely as Latina-owned firms and 3 times as likely as Black-owned firms to have their financing needs met. And these disparities persist even when we look at firms with low credit risk. So yeah, aside from capital access, they also tend to have fewer peer networks, which can be important for mentorship and accessing business knowledge. They have less access to business management training. Government programs meant to help entrepreneurs are often not well targeted to the needs of entrepreneurs of color. So this includes programs like Small Business Administration lending programs, technical assistance programs, and also the amount of federal contracting dollars going to minority-owned businesses could be higher than it currently is. And finally, another barrier is the lack of a centralized database of small business lending data. So this makes it difficult to determine where exactly lending discrimination is occurring, so it can then be addressed. This does have the potential to change with a recent ruling, Section 1071 by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in our panel discussion. So then in our next slide, we, in this report, recognizing that there are multiple barriers to entrepreneurship, like I just went over in the previous slide, we decided to distill it down to 3 key bucket areas just based on our research and partner feedback. So that includes capital access, like I mentioned earlier, access to technical assistance, which from what we found was either entrepreneurs of color were not aware of such programs or didn't have the infrastructure to kind of apply for government resources, things like that. And then finally, data and transparency, like I mentioned, with small business lending data, you need to be able to see the problem in order to address it. Yeah, so the report goes a lot more in depth into these 3 bucket areas. It has policy recommendations specific to these areas. Also includes case studies of 3 organizations across the country that entrepreneurship support organizations and how they helped local entrepreneurs in their communities. That includes the Pierce County Business Accelerator in Washington State, which was just managed by Grant, one of our speakers today, and his firm, Next Consulting Firm. So I encourage you to read more about all of that in the report. But for now, I wanted to turn it over to you for our first poll question, which is in the next slide and should pop up for you. So just wanted to hear from your perspective, from your line of work, which of these do you see as the main challenge for small business owners of color? So do you think it's lending discrimination, limited peer networks or mentorship opportunities, less access to business management training, difficulty in accessing technical assistance, and or overrepresentation in low growth industries? So take a minute to submit your vote and we will see what the results are. All right. So see, pretty even split between lending discrimination and limited peer networks. We also have several of you choosing overrepresentation in low growth industries, and some of you think it's what's most important is business management training and difficulty in accessing TA. So thank you all for sharing those thoughts. And next, I want to turn it over to our speakers today. Yeah, so I would love for you all to just share any thoughts you have on either some of the data I shared above, or the results of our poll question from the audience. And please also go ahead and introduce yourself too. And I will turn it over to Clarinda first.
Hi, thank you. I'm Clarinda Landeros, the Director of Public Policy at NALCAB. NALCAB is the National Association for Latino Community Asset Builders. We're a national nonprofit intermediary and community development financial institution. We represent over 200 nonprofit community development organizations across the country. Many of them are lenders, about a third are CDFIs. Many of the people served by NALCAB are low to moderate income individuals, first and second generation immigrants. Our public policy work centers around strengthening the economy by supporting communities of color and opening up increasing economic opportunities for them. The second question was a reaction to the report. I think that the report highlighted many of the problems those of us working in this space and many of us watching this webinar that are or work with small businesses see all the time. And really, to sum it up, and I'm glad that we're talking about this, because it is that our public policies, that's the common theme here. Our public policies do not adequately support minority entrepreneurs. That's why we're not seeing the access to capital, equitable access to capital and the technical assistance that minority entrepreneurs need, and why we're seeing lending discrimination. We need a strong agency, CFPB, and policies that support minority entrepreneurs. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to the other panels. I don't want to take up all the time on the first one.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tasha Brown. I am Midwest Director of Small Business Majority. Small Business Majority is a nonprofit organization that is based in DC, but we have offices across the nation. Our focus is on small business owners and those who are sole proprietors, those who are the smallest businesses in the small business ecosystem. And so we want to make sure that they are prepared to drive a thriving and equitable economy. And so as I look at the survey results, I'm really not surprised, as Clarinda mentioned, but one thing that I saw in the report that wasn't shared is how if these tides changed for small business owners, there would be at least 9.5 million jobs added to our economy. And so we already know that small business ownership represents 99% of employers in the US, but looking at if we change things and if we resource small business owners, that we can really grow the economy. And so while the numbers are staggering for the disparities, there's also hope that things could change. And so I'm going to turn it over to our next panelist, Grant.
All right, thanks, Tasha. Grant Twyman here, managing partner with Next Consulting Firm. We're based out of Washington State, and we consider ourselves a small business in the work of executive coaching. We do training, and we really specialize in helping large organizations in terms of being a thought partner and then implementing strategic initiatives. One of the things that we find ourselves most proud about lately is the Pierce County Business Accelerator, which is really an amazing program we've been able to not just start but continue to maintain. In the Prosperity Noun report, we had completed 200 businesses graduating a small business accelerator. Right now we're up to 311. That's in 4 languages, representing 9 cities, 11 different kinds of businesses going through that program, and it's been incredible. I think 90% of our businesses that graduated are BIPOC owned. All of them women owned, veteran owned. So that's kind of been our target population. And when I think about the data here, I agree with Clorinda and Tasha, and I would add, I think we definitely have to be, from a policy perspective and just kind of seeing what's happening, we have to be doing both, like this structural institutional change, as well as, right, there's some skills and training needed for small businesses, specifically BIPOC owned small business. So I think we have to be doing both, right? That institutional policy, systemic work, as well as how are we helping folks overcome some of the mindset barriers, or even upskilling folks, or even helping kind of corralling folks to, the beauty salon or the baker is a great small business, but thinking about some of those, like a tech company, right? How are we helping folks launch companies that are really able to scale, and create generational wealth in a shorter period of time? And so I think we have to be doing both. So that's what I would add to what Tasha and Clarissa said. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts. On the next slide then, I'd like to turn it over to Clorinda and Tasha. If you could tell us, from your view, what policy change can help dismantle some of these barriers for entrepreneurs of color that we talked about.
Sure, Tasha. Okay. The Community Reinvestment Act. That would be, when we were talking about access to capital, we need to, look at incentivizing banks to lend to traditionally underserved borrowers, and using the Community Reinvestment Act as a tool for that. For those that don't know, because it was a long time ago, CRA was enacted in 1977 and it requires federal banking regulators to assess the extent to which financial institutions are meeting the credit needs in the communities that they serve, including low and moderate income neighborhoods. The way that CRA could be strengthened is by including evaluating banks on their lending by race and ethnicity. That isn't the current law. So that's a priority. That would incentivize them, and also allow us to hold banks accountable. On that note, also data collection. It's really, really hard to show what we know to be true, discrimination, disparities in access to capital without having the data. And so Section 1071 of Dodd-Frank, I mean, there's a big fight right now going on with the CFPB and its constitutionality. And this has a very small business angle, and that is that the CFPB is charged with enforcing or implementing fair lending laws, and that's including Section 1071, which requires the CFPB to collect data on small women-owned, minority-owned businesses and to make that publicly available. This past year, it became the CFPB issued the rule, but it's vulnerable right now because of the attacks on CFPB constitutionality. And then there's even a resolution that I think passed committee in the House that would even rescind the rule and keep Section 1071 from being implemented. So that's a policy priority, is defending the CFPB and Section 1071, which collects the data that we need. Also, we talk about technical assistance. That was one of the poll questions. With the 1,500 CDFIs throughout the country, only less than 200 are minority-led. We should be investing in these institutions that give wraparound services and provide the technical assistance, and that are the lenders when there's nowhere else to go to get the financing. So that, making sure the CDFI fund is properly funded or robustly funded. Also, supporting aspiring CDFIs, supporting minority-led or minority aspiring CDFIs, making sure they have the tools also to increase that number. and from at least so that the communities that if there's the more minority-led CDFIs, that's a unique perspective, a unique set of services that you're providing the communities, particularly in minority communities. That, and then also, just before I turn it over to Tasha, I would also the Community Advantage Program, making sure that's permanent. I mean, right now the SBA, the Small Business Administration, is the #1 agency charged with supporting small business. Two of their programs that specifically target minority entrepreneurs with capital is the microloan program and Community Advantage Program. Both are vulnerable. Or microloan is always vulnerable in the budget, so that it would be a priority to make sure that program is funded. And then Community Advantage, the pilot program, it also targets underserved entrepreneurs. But just to give a little bit more on that, the CA program works to expand SBA lending to small businesses in underserved communities by creating loan guarantees specifically for mission-oriented lenders, primarily nonprofit financial intermediaries focused on economic development. I imagine many of those are in this audience. So that program is a pilot program. It's been a pilot since 2011. Senator Cardin introduced the bill this past July to make it permanent. It passed committee and hasn't passed the House yet. That's the priority, reaching out to your senators and supporting this bill to bring more resources or to fund a program at SBA that targets what we're talking about here, minority entrepreneurs. For other ones, so I don't take up all the time, we have NALCAP has, and I know we'll mention it later, our Latino economic policy agenda that has other policies that I'm not mentioning for the sake of time. So we can put that in the chat also, and it's on our website. But with that, Tasha.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So I wanted to underscore the SBA's role in this. With the Community Advantage Loan Program, the SBA has seen a significant increase of minority entrepreneurs being served through this. And so this particular program sunsets on September 30th, so a couple of days from now. So we're hoping that it can be extended. And as Clarinda mentioned, being able to call your senators and representatives to make sure that they vote in favor of this continuing and that it becomes permanent is important. The other thing that I wanted to mention is making sure that we expand access to the responsible credit and access to capital, and that we pass the Small Business Finance and Disclosure Act. I'm not sure if you all know the number of small business owners that turn to alternative funding because they are unable to access credit through traditional banks. And because of that, they find themselves in these financing products that really are harmful and predatory in nature. And so what we're looking for is for the Small Business Financing Disclosure Act to be passed to make sure that there's transparency when it comes to securing some of these financing options. So let me give you an example. With a bank, with a traditional consumer loan, you have APR, annualized percentage rate. But when it comes to business financing, those rates are not disclosed. They're not formed in terms of APR. You may see loan fee, you may see a repayment amount, but what we're looking for is for transparency so that a small business owner would know how much they have to repay and the percentage at which they have to repay that financing option. And so we're looking for that to be passed to make sure that folks are not being preyed upon. The other thing that we're looking for and that we think will be helpful to dismantling some of these barriers is passing the Women and Minority Equity Investment Act. And so for those who watch Shark Tank every now and again, you will notice that a lot of the investors talk about having a percentage of equity in the person's business. Well, if you're trying to be a contractor with the federal government or even with a private entity, you know that you have to have majority ownership. So if an equity partner dilutes your ownership, then it basically disqualifies you from being able to access that contract. And we know a lot of these corporate and government contracts can make the difference in being a very profitable business or not. And so what we're asking for and what we're looking to support is the Women and Minority Equity Investment Act, which basically preserves the equity of the business owner, even if they have investment partners. The other thing, the third thing that we believe can help dismantle some of these barriers is basically monitoring the implementation of the Reauthorized State Small Business Credit Initiative, or SSBCI for short. Basically, we want to make sure that the SBDCs that Clorinda mentioned and the technical assistance providers that have been mentioned are able to have funding in order to provide the business mentoring and the business assistance that a lot of the small business owners need. Yes, it's important for them to hear about it, but once those funds are not available, then these organizations will not be able to provide those services. So we really want to make sure that the Reauthorized SSBCI initiative is in fact underway, it is being monitored, and that small business owners are being resourced through the small business organizations that support them.
Great, thank you both. So yeah, we just talked a bit about the big picture policy change that needs to happen, which is important. But so is the work, programmatic work happening on the ground by local organizations. So Grant, I'd love to hear from you. What can local entrepreneurship support organizations do to help business owners in their communities?
Yeah, for sure. Good question. And so as I try and approach this question, I'm going to try and first talk about what we've witnessed and work that we've been leading, because we didn't see ourselves as a local entrepreneurship support organization. We're a consulting firm, right? We do large project implementation, and so when you pair that with partnerships with local entrepreneurship support organizations like the SBDC or economic development agencies and alliances, or chambers of commerce, or economic development departments in a county or a city, right? Those are our partners when we're talking economic development, small business support and development. We've been able to partner. And so one of the things I wrote down three. The first one is small business accelerators. Huge, right? One of the things that has happened really successfully that can be replicated is an abbreviated training program that ties some of the big things with running and sustaining and scaling a small business, is branding, marketing, understanding your why as it relates to customer acquisition, customer retention, right? Doing training on that. Access to capital, one of the key pieces, right? And Clorinda and Tasha just kind of spoke to policy around lending and banking. One of the things we've seen is BIPOC small businesses raise 2.9 million in capital for their businesses using CDFIs and small business loans, and that's in a 2-year time period. Well, our program partner with Pierce County was able to match that with another 2.5 million, so 5.4 million in new capital to small businesses all throughout our county. How does that happen? The right partnerships, the right relationships, and then training, right? That provides skills that small businesses can then use to access capital right away. We've seen these small businesses acquire other businesses, right? In terms of business expansion, we've seen them create new jobs all throughout our county. We have most of the businesses report increases in revenue after graduating the accelerator. And so launching a small business accelerator, huge. Now, key pieces there, if we're talking about specific populations, your staff and your instructors, they need to reflect your target population if you want it to be successful, if you want it to be effective. The other one is small business navigators. A ton of resources, a ton of things happening in particular cities and counties. And when we're talking about populations that have been typically kind of pushed out and left out, historically marginalized, or communities of concern, a strategy that local support organizations can do is contracting or hiring navigators that have cultural capital, that have relationship capital with your target population. We're talking about BIPOC business owners, and can help folks understand what are the resources out there. How do I make the most of it to grow and sustain my business or overcome barriers? And then the other one is in the last, honestly, probably in the last year, closer to the last 6 to 8 months, we've been doing some work around assessing and understanding our small business and entrepreneurial ecosystem here in our county. And so that's literally a coalition right now of folks attending a meeting, all in that small business entrepreneurship support lane, meeting to understand what's happening in our community, who's doing what, who are all the players, who's being left out, and then how do we be coordinated and intentional in how we support not just entrepreneurs across our county, for sure, but entrepreneurs that are typically left out, right? Communities of concern. And so having folks kind of at that 30,000 foot view level, looking at all the players and how can we be more intentional? How can we be really coordinated are some of the things that local support organizations can be doing to help business owners in our community. Thanks, Myrtle.
Great, thank you, Grant. Yeah, so next up, so we talked a little bit about policy previously. Now we want to talk about what you as advocates can do to advance some of these policies forward. So on the next slide, we have another poll question for you. Just wanted to get a sense of what is your experience level when it comes to policy advocacy. So would you say you're beginner, so maybe no experience or have engaged in it a little bit, intermediate, maybe you're familiar with it, have some experience with it, or advanced, so you're comfortable doing this work, reaching out to your legislators, writing letters, all of that. So give you a minute to respond to that. All right, so we are seeing beginner and intermediate are tied, and then we have some folks saying advanced. So that's great. We hope that some some of the resources, what we shared today, will help you become a bit more comfortable and get some more experience in doing this kind of work. So on the next slide, I wanted to turn it over to Tasha and Clorinda again to talk a bit more about what can people do to advocate for some of these policies.
Sure, that's a great question. Yeah, from the poll, I was surprised to see so many beginner and intermediate, but also really excited because the more people involved in advocacy, in that part, and advocacy is a numbers game. So if you don't get everything you need at the end of this webinar, reach out. We want to be helpful. We want more people. More small business advocates out there. What can you do? I don't know if it's gonna come up on a slide, but just as a frame of reference, a resource that we have, and I know Prosperity now has resources too, to help engage in advocacy. We have a toolkit. So and really it just goes over different ways of targeting your message. So we want to support small businesses. So you can target your member of Congress. You can, call, you can do a letter, and then we have scripts on, like, if you were to call, your member of Congress, so that's where you should start, is your member of Congress. Have a relationship with them, let them know small business is something that you care about, that you're a constituent. Know the staff person that works on it, and not just your member of Congress, but, all throughout your mayor, your governor. Like Grant said, knowing the players, that helps in policy work too, knowing the players, and making sure they know you. And then and then also seeing what other groups. I mean, if you're on this webinar, that's good. So you're amongst friends, people that are active on these issues. But that's important. Know who is active, because sometimes when you're doing advocacy, you don't have the time, maybe you don't have any staff that do policy, or you've got one person, or it's the ED. other organizations is helpful, because you could sign on to a letter. You can join events that are already in place. You can support efforts that you align with. So definitely look for coalition members, and then from there, honestly, in Congress, that once I don't know if it's Small Business 101, it might be 102, but it's always good to know that the committees of jurisdiction over this issue. So in the House, at the House Small Business Committee, Chair Williams, Roger Williams from Texas is the chair. Ranking member Nydia Velasquez from New York, and then the Senate Small Business Committee, Senator Cardin and Senator Ernst from Iowa. So know those. That's part of knowing the players. That's the players in Congress. And with that, I will turn it over to Tasha.
So I would encourage, especially small business owners on this call, to share your story. I wanted to pull up the name of this law. It's not related to small business, but I want to share with you the impact a story can have. And so there was a fireman who was assisting someone on the Dan Ryan in Chicago, who was involved in a crash, and he was killed as he was assisting because he was hit by another motorist. And now we have Scott's Law. One individual was able to enact change. His family was able to enact change because of what happened to him. And I know as we throw out the numbers, millions of small business owners, as we feel so small in this world, I want us to really know and understand that our stories do make a difference. And so if you notice from the PPP loans, a lot of small business owners talked about their inability to access those loans. And as a result, another round of PPP was offered. And so don't discredit the impact of your story and what you're going through. I hope you're able to find trusted resources such as the Small Business Majority or NALCAB or Next Consulting, that you can talk to individuals and share the struggles you're having as a small business owner. And then that bubbles up to some type of policy or legislation that can be enacted on your behalf. But if you're not sharing your story, then we're not able to move the needle on a lot of these policies. As you heard us talk about them earlier, these policies are to make sure that you're protected, that you're okay. There are consumer protections involved, a lot of protections for us as consumers with lending and with credit, but now we're trying to move the needle on protections for small business owners. And so the way that you can be a part of this process is to share your story. There are many times where I would reach out to small business owners to see if they're willing to share their stories through testimonies in Congress or testimonies in some of the Senate hearings that we attend, or to share their stories with the media. We're always looking for you to validate your experience and have other small business owners validate your experiences as well. And then the other steps that you can take: have conversations with your legislators, get to know them. They are public servants. Oftentimes we are afraid to reach out, but they are paid to work on your behalf. And so make sure you have those relationships with the public servants in your area and share with them your concerns, and don't be afraid to share that and know that you're not alone. So that's the really big thing that I would invite people to do, is to share their story, speak out. I know it can be a little embarrassing, for those who wants to tell people that they secured a loan that equates to about 300% interest. Yes, we understand it may be a little embarrassing, but because of your story, you're able to dismantle a lot of the barriers, or share that you have a 700 credit score, 750 credit score, and you weren't able to get a $10,000 loan. Well, something is wrong structurally there, right? And so we wouldn't know that unless small business owners communicate that to us. So share your story is one way of advocating for a lot of these policies and changes.
Great. Thank you, Tasha and Corinda. And then on the next, or I think it's a couple slides down, Grant, it would be great to hear from you. What do you think entrepreneurship support organizations need to continue their work of serving business owners?
Yeah, good question. By the way, I'm pumped by Tasha's response just now. Like, I feel like I have to answer this on the heels of what she said. So I would say, and I'm kind of reading the question now as kind of like a call to action or a charge for folks on the call. Not only are the stories so important, Tasha, you killed that, by the way. And because that's the case, because individual stories are so crucial, it's important for all of us to make sure we have proximity to folks who have these stories. Because if they can't find us, if they can't reach us, God help all of us, you know what I mean? And so for local support organizations, entrepreneurship chambers, SBDCs, economic development departments, right? You name it, ensure we have real proximity to small business owners, specifically BIPOC small business owners. Make sure we have those relationships. And then, so I would say one, what do they need to do to continue serving? Real proximity, authentic relationship. They're hearing the stories and then carrying those messages. And then I'm gonna go quick to the second one, which is kind of reaching back to question 1 and 2, forming relationships with small business lenders, right? So small business bankers, to then create this bridge of relationship for small businesses in our community. And so I think we have a role and responsibility, if you're an entrepreneurship support organization, is you're using your relationship capital, your connections, your network, and creating new connections, right, in relationship for folks to benefit specifically small businesses. And then the third piece I'm going to say is, and then I'll be done, to kind of give some space for Q&A. And I would say, and this is kind of hard to just say this, but be innovative, right? Think outside the box. Create space to hear from folks in your community, not just to understand their needs, but then to collaborate and co-create solutions, right? And ways to overcome obstacles, right? And so you're going to have to think outside the box and be innovative. I'll shout out the Washington SBDC right now. They said to us probably a year and a half ago, to me and my partner Rachel Askew, we need to serve the BIPOC community. We've been around for decades, and we have not served the BIPOC small business owners well. And part of the issue is most of our advisors are bald-headed white dudes. And one of the things that we like to say in response to stuff like that is, we love bald-headed white dudes, but there is going to be a gap in being able to serve small business owners of color well or effectively, right? And so you're going to have to diversify your advisors. But you can't just do that. They're W-2 employees. So we were able to be innovative, use funding from the SBA and the local university to augment their advisors with business coaches that reflect the target population, and multiplied the number of small businesses of color, small business owners of color that the Washington SBDC has been able to serve. So that was one of those innovative approaches that I think all entrepreneurship support organizations need to be thinking about, and need to do if we're going to close wealth gaps, if we're really going to be about equity and entrepreneurship is going to be inclusive. I think innovation is going to be key. And then I'll stop there, Myrtle.
Great. Thank you all for sharing those very important points. I'd then like to move us all to our final poll question for you. Now that we just talked a little bit about advocacy, want to see how comfortable do you feel taking one of the advocacy actions we've discussed today. So not very comfortable, maybe you still feel like you need guidance, pretty comfortable, you can give it a try, or very comfortable, you're ready to go. So I will give you a little bit of time to answer that. Awesome. So over half of you, it looks like you're feeling pretty comfortable. Some of you not very comfortable, which is okay. We, again, hope you'll be able to look through some of the resources we've shared today. You can feel free to reach out to us for more support if you need. And some of you say you're very comfortable, which is awesome to hear. Great. So very quickly, and please keep the questions coming in the Q&A box. We will get to those in just a minute, but very quickly, for the sake of time, just want to share some advocacy resources that Prosperity Now offers. We'll can drop those links in the chat for you, and you'll be able to access them in this PowerPoint later. So our Action Center, you can go there to see Prosperity Now's campaigns, be able to contact your legislator through phone or email. Our advocacy toolkit has just resources on types of advocacy, tips for doing it effectively, exploring racial economic equity and policy advocacy, talks about specifically how organizations of color can engage in advocacy with racial economic equity at the forefront. We have our recordings from Camp Prosperity. So this is our annual summer advocacy boot camp. And it's a series of webinars, so you can access those recordings through that link. We have our scorecard, which is a great resource, data on household financial health, racial economic equity. And you can use that data to make the case for the issue area you care about, want to advocate for. And we also have our federal, state, and local policy priorities. So feel free to take a look at those to see what Prosperity Now is working on across all our issue areas. But with that, I want to turn it over to you all again and see what questions the audience has. So first one.
And I would just make one comment on the being uncomfortable, right? Like have people say they were comfortable, and some people say they weren't uncomfortable. And I would just say that it is kind of uncomfortable. You're going into a policymaker's office and telling a story, like Tasha was saying, sometimes they're not stories that show us in the best light or that show our communities in the best light. That can be uncomfortable, but it is a muscle, and it gets easier. I would say I would not want some being uncomfortable to be a deterrent. It's so important, and even if you're good at it and do it all the time, it can still be uncomfortable.
Yeah, that was a great point, Clorinda. Thank you. So yeah, our first question then from the audience is for Grant. So can you share your lessons learned from the work that you've done to help business owners in your community?
Good question. Lessons learned. The first one that comes to mind is I think we partner really well with community-based organizations that aren't specifically doing economic development. And so when we're supporting small businesses, you can easily forget that there are a host of other nonprofits all throughout your community that are also working with communities of concern or BIPOC communities. And so being able to partner with them and gain more understanding, in some cases share resources, in some cases collaborate to serve the community well. I think that one is a missed piece that we could have. And so we learned that right at the onset, and was able to work well with the Black Collective, Asian Pacific Cultural Center, Me Centro, so a host of CBOs throughout our community has been huge for us. Another quick lesson learned that I'll share is don't underestimate the brilliance and genius of BIPOC small business owners in your community who are just amazing people and are killing the game in some cases in spite of the systems at work against them. And so for sure lift up the success and the brilliance that exists in your community, and lean on their feedback and input and their stories to for you as an organization or a leader to be better. So those are two I'll just share real quick.
Great. And another question we have is what funding resources are available for private, for-profit social enterprises focused on real-world inclusive entrepreneurship solutions that are moving the needle? Any thoughts on that?
I want to share that, there are what COVID has done, what the pandemic has done is really brought about a lot of these innovative grant opportunities for small business owners, because there was a time when there weren't a lot of grant opportunities available for small business owners. I would just encourage people to look at their local CDFIs, because they are also receiving some funding to offer grants, put grants on the streets. There are some nonprofit organizations that offer grants. It may not be specific for inclusive entrepreneurship, but it is to help those who are from the BIPOC community. And I can make sure that a link is shared with you afterwards for a Latino grant that we have, that we're supporting, support small businesses up to $2,500. I know it may not be enough to buy a lot of equipment, but it's something to help individuals. So I'll make that available to you all at the end of the webinar.
So we're a for-profit organization, and so thinking about question 2, we partner with nonprofits and foundations to access different funding to support small businesses. So that's another strategy that you could use. It doesn't have to be you going for, a state bid. You could, right, as a for-profit company, but being able to partner with nonprofits to collaborate and access funding to support small businesses is another strategy.
Great. Oh, sorry. Somebody going to say something?
Yeah, philanthropy. I was going to say, private sources outside of government funding could be another potential area to get funds for that too.
Great, thank you for that. And we have one final question. Might need to be a bit quick about this. I know we're nearing the end of time, but an attendee said one of the challenges with securing a loan can also be bookkeeping, which was highlighted during the pandemic assistance programs. And is bookkeeping an area that should fall into technical assistance, business-to-business networking, technology assistance, or something else?
I would say
That's 100%. A great question.
Oh, sorry. Did you want to go, Clorinda?
No, you go ahead. I'll go after you.
I would say 100% yes. With boots on the ground, leading several programs, bookkeeping is probably, when we offer grants through our county for technical assistance, bookkeeping is one of the options. Between that and SEO, search engine optimization, are the 1 and 2 top picks for folks in terms of applying for technical assistance for us. And so I think it's huge. Another one I'll add is being able to support bookkeepers who English isn't their first language, right? And so folks that are bilingual, whether it's Spanish or Vietnamese, or even speaking Chamorro, I think we have to support folks that can do bookkeeping in other languages, because again, we're talking about equity, we're talking about inclusive entrepreneurship. I think huge. So good question, number 3.
I mean, he nailed it. That was everything I was going to say. Absolutely. We've heard that too. And I like the way the question is worded, that should it be technical assistance or something else? And so, in terms of when you're looking at policy, it sometimes is that specific, like, would this be eligible under TA, or where would we put this? And right now, again, looking at it from that perspective, it does seem to be like it would fall under technical assistance most easily, conveniently.
Great, thank you all. And we are almost at time, so I want to thank you. Thank you to our great speakers today. We have our contact details on this slide if you want to get in touch with us. And in terms of next steps, you can visit Prosperity Now's Action Center. Please complete the follow-up survey. Sign up for one of our networks for the issue areas you care about. And yeah, we want to thank you all for joining today's webinar, and hope you have a great rest of your day.